We have an excellent panel for you. My job here is simply to introduce the moderator of the panel, who is a good, long-standing friend of mine, Brenda Welbird, who is the former executive director of the National Association of State Boards of Education, who did that job for longer than she cares to remember, I think. But Brenda has been a real leader in education here in DC and working with all of the organizations that help state policymakers deal with education reform. So please join me in welcoming Brenda Welbird.
Good morning. Good morning, and I'm delighted to be here and delighted to introduce to you a terrific panel, because our panel brings to you a conversation through the eyes of advocacy, local district, state work, and the eyes of mayors. So we have lots of voices that we can hear about as we travel down this implementation plan. And so our speakers this morning, our participants, include Jonah Edelman, who's the Chief Executive Officer of Stand for Children, Eric Gordon, the Chief Executive Officer of the Cleveland Metropolitan School District in Ohio, Tom Kimbrell, Commissioner of Education from Arkansas, and Mayor Scott Smith from Mesa, Arizona, and Vice President of the United States Conference of Mayors. So please welcome our panel this morning. I think Eric set me up nicely in his final comments when he talked about the fact that we are in a bubble in this conversation. And so in preparation for today, I asked two people what they felt I was talking about when I said college and career ready. I asked a businessman whose children are out of school, and I asked a parent. The businessman wanted to make sure that I knew that he knew that I wasn't talking simply about a 4-year baccalaureate degree, that post-secondary education included community colleges and apprenticeships and other kinds of learning and teaching opportunities. The parent went to Mike's point of it's either or. That's when schools help kids decide how they're going to get into college or how they're going to get a job. And so that's the challenge we continue to face, that although everyone in this room understands clearly what we mean by college and career ready, we still need to make that argument to everyday citizens, to political leaders, and to business people. So I'm going to start, before we ask you about your implementation strategies, I'm going to ask each of my panelists to give me their 30-second soundbite on what college and career readiness means and why it's important. Begin with you, Tom.
Okay.
Sure.
Well, for us,
I almost brought my kitchen timer now.
Well, they got a timer.
Okay.
Well, my 30-second soundbite to our citizens in Arkansas, because we are a pretty simple state. We try to keep things pretty simple. We have to prepare our students to be able to continue to relearn and reinvent themselves in their adulthood, because the future is going to continue to change. So whether they leave high school ready to go to a college, whether they leave high school ready to go into the workforce, that set of skills and knowledge has to be the same, because they're going to have to change not only jobs, but careers in their future. So they have to have a set of skills and knowledges that allow them to do that over and over and over again in their adulthood.
Good deal. Let's go right down the line.
You might be wondering what a mayor is doing here. Since the vast majority of you, notwithstanding the Chicago situation where Mayor Emanuel is smack dab in the middle of that, about 95% of mayors have no involvement with their direct involvement with their school districts, and yet it's the top issue in the U.S. Conference of Mayors is education, and that's because the stark reality that we have been faced with this recession is that America is not ready for a global economy. We're not ready for the world for tomorrow. So when we talk about career ready, we have a much more basic issue, which is what does that really mean in the world tomorrow? Why are we educating our children, and what is their future? I'm not sure we understand that. And if you want to get a stark example of why we don't understand that, look at the presidential campaign and the rhetoric that comes out in the national politics. And mayors are very concerned with that, because we see on a daily basis the realities of the economy we're working in. We see the realities of the future that we have to deal with, and what it will take for our citizens as individuals and for our communities as groups to be able to take advantage of economic opportunities that come.
Eric.
I would say when I talk with our families in Cleveland, college and career ready is kind of the buzz now. And what we talk about for our kids is that we want them to have choices and that they can make not an either or decision, but that they can choose to enter a traditional four-year college. They can choose to enter the workforce in a skilled way. They can choose to do work that we would consider the high school only exit. The difference for us is that they're making the choice and we're not damning them into any one decision.
Jonah?
Nothing to add around the traditional definition, but what I'd say is that there's not enough attention paid to the fact that college and career readiness is not just the moment when a young person finishes high school, but it starts from the beginning of life. And those milestones that children need to reach, from kindergarten to grade level reading in third grade to being on track in middle school, when they take algebra, what's it looking like for them at the end of ninth grade, are so important, and we don't do enough, I think, to pay attention to particularly the earliest milestones, which are really the predictors for whether a child is going to be on track to truly be college or career ready by the time they finish high school.
Thanks. And I'm like Mike with adult children who have college degrees and took an opportunity to float through life at some point. So for me, the soundbite would be being able to start over at 30 years old. So you're all involved in implementation at some level. I'd like you to describe your involvement with the implementation, the work that you're doing, but I want you to include three things. I want you to include an aha moment, when you learn something that you didn't expect to learn, an oh no moment, when something happened that you knew could derail you, and an oh yeah moment when you said all cylinders are clicking and we're going to get this work done. And I'm going to start again with you, Tom.
Okay. We're just neck deep in the implementation as we're rolling out these new standards with our teachers. Last year with a K2, and then this year with 3-8, and anticipation next year with 9 through 12 with these two areas. And I think that's been the big heavy lift, is that work of getting all of that professional development put together and getting our teachers to understand why, and to understand that we have to develop students that have the ability to always be reinventing themselves and relearning. And so I think the complexity around all of that, being able to develop that next generation assessment that we worked yesterday, many of my colleagues in the room today, we sat for hours yesterday debating how these things were going to fit together and mesh, and it's hard work. So, with that rollout of the Common Core and really at the classroom level, ensuring that the instruction that happens between that teacher and that student is the most important piece. That's where we think is the big lift, and that's where we're trying to engage most of our work. I think the aha moment for me was talking with a lot of K2 teachers and hearing feedback from the K2 teachers after last year about how easy that really did happen for them and what they saw in the benefit of this. Now, understanding K2 teachers are the most adaptive teachers that we have in our educational system. If you ever go into a kindergarten classroom, you understand what I'm talking about. If you've ever been a kindergarten teacher, you're a hero of mine because you know how to adapt, you know how to move things forward. We look forward to what's going to happen this year, 3 through 8, and I would have to say that my oh no is probably going to come next year when we ask these high school teachers to reinvent what they're doing and to throw away those things that they used to do and to make these connections through these progressions of learning. Because I can say that I was a biology and chemistry teacher, and I taught biology and chemistry. That's what I taught. I didn't teach children, I taught biology and chemistry. So, it's tough for secondary people to make that kind of change and to understand what the expectation is for them. And I think the oh yeah moment has come over the last probably couple of weeks as these 3 through 8 teachers have gone through just a tremendous amount of professional learning, to begin to hear the stories coming not from their superintendents or their principals, but coming from the teachers, about what they're seeing their students do as they're developing their learning in the classrooms. as teachers are beginning to change their role as front of the classroom leader of information, deliverer of information, to allowing students to determine how they're going to learn these standards together and how these things are going to progress, and they take control of their learning. And these stories are coming to us in emails, they're coming to our webpage, and I think it's wonderful to see that they're embracing this change. So that's kind of been my, oh yeah, this is going to have an impact on what we see in the future for our state and what we think will be for the future of the country.
Thank you. Mayor Smith.
It seems like I get several aha moments every week, every month. I come from an educational family. My father was a superintendent of schools in Arizona for 35 years, and I ended up as superintendent of Mesa Public Schools. Mesa Public Schools is a top 50 district, about 65,000 students, another 7,000 to 8,000 within the district going to private charter schools, public charter schools. Publicly funded private charter schools, there we go. And so it's a big district. I talked to my dad a lot. He's 85 years old now, and I talked to him about the changes in the world, and not so much in education, but the changes in the world and how we meet. And my aha moments come in several cases, most notably when I have manufacturers in my city come and lament the fact that in spite of a horrible economy, the worst recession since the Great Depression, they have a list this long of unfilled jobs.
Right.
And the reason they have these unfilled jobs is they cannot find not educated people, skilled people. And these are mainly high-tech type manufacturing. The lathe operator that now needs to be basically a computer operator, the auto mechanic that no longer can move the distributor around. Heck, I just bought a new car. I've been through 2 sessions. I still have no idea how to work the dang display. I can only imagine what it takes to fix the dang thing. That's an aha moment. The other aha moment came in one of what I think is a very, very leading institution in our state, which is the East Valley Institute of Technology, which my father helped start as Mesa Votech 35 years ago. You know the Votech people who they're just not cut out for college. Let's stick them over here in a vocational thing so they can get a job. Well, that's morphed into the East Valley Institute of Technology, which now serves 11 school districts. And it's amazing to go into this facility and to see kids who spend the half day in the regular high school and then in this vocational. It's no longer the voc kids, because the aha moment came when you look at the matriculation rate of those EVIT students, and it's higher than even our college prep students. Matriculation, of course, meaning not only baccalaureate, but certificate, post-secondary. And you look at why that is the case, and to me it's because, number one, they're focused. They know where they want to go, and they know what they need to get to get there, which brought me to my oh no moment. And I love the comment about the bubble. And I'll tell you, the bubble is more profound than the people than you understand. And it came my own moment about the third time I heard a presentation. I heard Common Core mentioned. Now, I had absolutely no clue what Common Core meant. Now, I guessed, but I had to really, because it was like a different language. Once again, I come from an educational background. I've taught these things. I've been involved. I've gone to school a lot. I really didn't know exactly what Common Core meant. It was a term that missed me. And I'll tell you, if it misses me, I guarantee you if I go out in my community and talk to my parents and everything, they got no clue. They understand standardized test scores. They understand this. They have no idea what you're trying to accomplish. And if they don't understand what you're trying to accomplish, I guarantee you it's going to be very difficult for you to accomplish that. And as a mayor, I need you to accomplish that. Because this is, what's the third one? My oh yeah moment?
Yeah, it's good.
Okay. So my oh no is, how do we meet this gap? How do we meet this gap to operate in, and I hate the term a world economy, but that's what we live in. I was talking to the National Honor Society at one of our high schools one day, and I said, there's a couple things different between you in high school and me in high school. First of all, I never knew what a National Honor Society was when I was in high school. The second thing is, though, you operate in a much different world. When I graduated from high school, I didn't worry about the kid from Shanghai or the kid from Bangalore competing with me. Because the kid from Shanghai couldn't leave his country, his or her country, and the kid from Bangalore had to get up, get on a plane, move to the US, go to college here, stay here, and then compete with me. Guess what? That's not the world you operate in. These college graduates now, and the brightest, the best and brightest, the kid from Shanghai walks down the hall and plugs in his computer, and he's in direct competition with you. And that's a whole different world. So another oh no moment is to realize that while we concentrate on the gap between our, let's say, our second tier, our unfilled, we also have a secondary challenge, which is even then our best and brightest aren't matching up to world standards. And we've sort of felt, hey, we're okay up here, let's concentrate on there. And actually the problem is multi-leveled, and we're struggling with the basic thing, basic terms, basic idea. In other words, why do we educate our kids? Historically in the United States, and I read this just recently, education was a social issue. We educated because it was, that's what a democracy does, is have an educated populace so we can stay free. And the thought that now really we've moved beyond that into our future and our kids' future as far as being educated as an economic issue is something we, I don't believe as a nation, have fully come to grasp with, which is why when you say, why do we need to do a Common Core, it's much more serious than others. And that's the oh yeah, which is, I think we're headed in the right direction, but I think we have much more work to do at the very base level. So we understand that we are truly a nation at risk, and that message has been now, when did that report come out? 20, 30 years ago? And it still seems like we just haven't been slapped in the face with reality. And the reality is that as we come out, some of the jobs and the careers that existed and have been the mainstay of American society for generations no longer exist. And we need to train for that. And so I applaud you for this effort. And that's the, oh yeah, we're headed in the right direction, but I think we have a much greater task than we imagine. That was a negative. That was really a downer, wasn't it?
That was fine.
I apologize.
That's
but things
okay,
are looking
'cause
up.
It's all on Eric's shoulder because he's got to
Let me
deal
bring
with
us
it
up.
every day in Cleveland.
So, when I started this work, I was the district academic officer, and I remember sitting with my leadership team with the very first draft of the Common Core, and one of my team members who runs all of our data systems, writes the scripts and all this stuff, she's Kenyan-born, and we were looking through the standards, and she said, wow, this looks like the math I had when I was in school. And I thought, that was my aha moment. Like, these are very distinctly un-American standards, right? And that's actually a really good thing because, we're now in an international stage. But that was just I remember like stopping the conversation and saying, what did you say? And thinking that was just a profoundly important recognition, is that these, for so many reasons, are distinctly un-American, and that's going to be important in how we communicate them differently, and how we teach them differently. And so that was just a big, very first moment for me. So then I got to the oh no moment almost as quickly, because so we started really looking at, so what does this mean? David Coleman always says that you have to help kids read like a detective and write like a reporter. It's this text dependency. It's this mining for evidence. And as we started talking about this with teachers, and we pretty quickly started some teacher workshopping to help and build awareness, and we pretty quickly, as we were debriefing it, we found that we have an entire adult, not just teachers, but an entire adult community that wasn't taught that themselves. And so now we're asking people who were not taught these skills to teach these skills. And so that was my big oh no moment. It's like, okay, how do you do this, And I've really reflected a lot on that, and particularly in a large urban district, so there's a scaling issue here too. Automotive is really important to us in Ohio, and so I really looked to automotive and said, and it is, with the computer in the car, it isn't professional development. They didn't come in and say, well, let me give you a 30-minute workshop on how this computer works, and that's the difference between the distributor cap and go back to work. It's actually a workforce retraining effort. Mm-hmm. And unlike the automotive industry, right now in Toledo, they're actually shutting down a automotive plant. It's going to be down for about 6 months. It's going to reopen. They're going to train that workforce to run a brand new plant and build a totally different car. We have to actually do a workforce retraining while we're still operating the plant. And so that was my oh no moment, is that we're asking teachers to do things that many well-educated adults in our country don't actually have training on themselves. But then the oh yeah moment is one that I actually have very routinely. What excites me most about the work in the Common Core, and particularly as a leader of a large urban district, is that I can finally pick up the phone and talk to all of the other large urban districts about the work. And I'm lucky in Ohio that I was always able to talk to Columbus and Cincinnati. We have a number of large urbans, but now I can talk to New York and St. Paul and Seattle and say, how are you addressing this? And I'm very fortunate that Cleveland is a part of a national network through the Council of the Great City Schools, where we're actually intentionally building these relationships. And so my oh yeah moments one's occurring right now in Cleveland, where urban districts from across the country are workshopping on creating text-dependent questions for the basal readers that we're all commonly using, so that we can take them back, and that I don't have to do the work in Cleveland and then find out that somebody's doing exactly the same work in St. Louis. When I get an email that says, here is the next set of parent guides, and thank you to Cleveland who translated them all into Puerto Rican dialect Spanish, and thank you to New York who translated them into Cron, and thank you to, and we have this common thing that is really giving us mass capacity really quickly. And we have that same opportunity with our states. Ohio has incredible resources and materials and videos, and if you haven't seen them, you need to, model units. And we're able to take those and compare those and add them to the portfolio of tools that New York has created and other states have created. And so the oh yeah moment for me is that with this incredible task before us, this retooling before us, we also have great new ways of delivering it that we haven't had in the past.
Jonah.
I would say I have many more oh no moments than aha moments.
I'm glad somebody else is down there on this panel. Thank you.
But an aha moment, two recent ones. One was talking to members of Stand for Children who are immigrants from Mexico about how they feel like the math instruction they got when they were growing up is a lot more advanced than what their children are getting in this country. That was one. And another was speaking to the Indiana Grantmakers Alliance a few months ago and asking the audience, who are the leading philanthropists in the state, if they knew about Common Core. And pretty much every hand went up. And then I asked whether they felt like they could explain it to a friend. And there were no hands up in the room. And that underscores, I think, what the other panelists are saying in terms of the urgency. An oh no moment was once we began to engage, and we're working in 10 states, 9 of which have adopted the Common Core. And it's been wonderful working with Sandy Boyd and Alyssa Peltzman to figure out how Stand for Children, as one of those third-party advocacy groups that Andy Rotherham was talking about, could be helpful. And to realize the timelines and how important the 2013 legislative sessions are was an oh no moment for us, because of the need to secure appropriations for technology, professional development, additional student support, and working with other policymakers, many of you in the room, your counterparts, around certain decisions that are going to be challenging for you, that all this is coming down the pike very, very fast. An oh yeah moment, I would just share 2 briefly that are very different, because Stan does parent engagement with low-income parents to teach them how to support their own children's education. I think parents are not engaged nearly enough, and not enough of the part of the sort of the focus of the education so-called reform effort. And then one legislative. So last week was in a Cesar Chavez Elementary in the Roosevelt School District in Phoenix, very low-income area. And at 8:15 in the morning, just after drop-off, there were 86, this is an elementary, 86 parents, and there's some grandparents, in a cafeteria to attend the first of 10 sessions of our Stand University for Parents to learn how to better support their children. And in that session, which was in Spanish, and these are mostly monolingual Spanish speakers. The question was asked, how many of you want your children to go to college? And every single hand shot up. And then the question was asked, how many of you feel confident that your children are going to go to college? And very few of the hands shot up. And so, I mean, I think that the gap between the expectations and desires and the knowledge of how to get where parents want their children to get is very large. Final one is to see in a state like Tennessee, where I know we have a delegation, the movement that has been created, and there are other states, many other states in this room where there's been just tremendous movement over the past 5 years. You know, where things maybe 5 years ago or 6 years ago felt fairly stuck. Most recent example in Memphis, you have the Memphis City Schools combining with the Shelby County Schools in one of the biggest consolidations. And you had a seminal school board election of the 7 board members who were going to be the board members of the Shelby County School District, which is going to set the direction for the next 4 years. And my colleagues there, in a very grassroots effort, with strong community support, reached 165,000 voters and succeeded in winning 4 of the seats of the 7, including defeating an incumbent who was very, very well known in the community by 88 votes. And to see parents canvassing when it's 100 degrees out, who themselves, had never been political activists before this cycle because they knew the stakes for their kids, was very inspiring.
So Jonah, let me stay with you for a moment on that same theme, because the collaboration at the state level, you have state affiliates, the collaboration with schools, with community, with business leaders, are there structured collaborative efforts that you can describe that other communities might adopt in working with non-governmental organizations and community-based organizations?
Well, I mean, on this issue, the issue at hand, I think there are great opportunities for collaboration because groups like STAND or like Colorado Succeeds or Advance Illinois, League of Education Voters in Washington, we see ourselves as being in service to you. We believe in the direction in which you're heading, in which you're leading the states, and we know you need help from the standpoint of advocacy. We know that you need help in advocating for appropriations. We know you need help on the policy front. We know that you may be, if you're a state chief, working with a state board, trying to move decisions that are not going to be politically popular, and you need support. And finally, we know you need help on awareness raising, so that if we can help with digital marketing or paid ads, if we can raise the resources, or a telephone town hall, like we did last night in Chicago, we dialed 143,000 voters last night in Chicago on 4 calls, and had 28,000 people participate in the 4 calls, one of which was in Spanish, and that was on a different topic. But if we can do that related to the Common Core to engage parents so that they understand and embrace it, we would love to work with you all in that way. And I think there are other groups in the states that we're not in that would love to work with you in that way as well.
So Eric, a few years ago, Cleveland was known for one of the most severe dropout crises in the nation, and some consider you a rock star. You're doing yeoman's work there, improving that and getting that moving. If you were to leave Cleveland, what is the infrastructure there to make sure that this isn't Eric's reform? These aren't Eric's college and career standards, but this will be sustained if you were not the CEO of the Cleveland schools?
I guess the first thing I would say is that a few years ago we had this problem. We still have it today. And so we spend a great deal of time in Cleveland not hiding behind small successes to hide big problems. And so I think that's really important just from the onset. But we're really focusing on, I would say, 3 key things that that we believe will create sustainability. The first is really thinking about what are the core practices that need to be in place. So it is about the Common Core curriculum itself and the enhanced curriculum and the encore subjects as well. It's also about pedagogy, and really we're focusing on the Danielson framework and a defensible definition of great teaching. But then there's actually a third, and it's the connector for us between the core and the pedagogy, and that is the social and emotional learning of the students and the adults that have to do this work. So, the Common Core, inherent in it is the ability to persist, the ability to self-manage, the ability to work with others in solving problems. In a defensible definition of great teaching, you need teachers, and we heard it in the last panel. Teaching more than ever is about problem solving. It's about being able to persist and self-regulate and regulate others and those sorts of things. And so we're also working to embed an interconnectivity of these two by investing in social and emotional learning practices, teaching those to children and reinforcing them among adults. So that's the first thing that I would say. The second thing that I would say is really critical is we're working very hard to debrand education in Cleveland. So Cleveland, like many urban districts, and frankly like a lot of other districts, was really driving their education by whatever they bought, right? And so, and it's still happening today, so people have figured out that they should buy their RTI kit. They don't even know what RTI stands for, but they know they're supposed to have an RTI kit, right? And so we're really working hard to debrand education, because those are exactly the same ways where it's like, okay, well, he's gone and his stuff is gone, and she's here and her things come, as opposed to really getting, again, just at some core practices of the way we behave. And then the third is that, and I think this is where Cleveland's been most successful, and it goes to A Nation at Risk. A Nation at Risk came out in 1983. I was in the 8th grade when we started talking about this. And no city yet, in my opinion, has said as a city, not just as the school district or not as some portion of the city, but as an all-in, parents and politicians and business leaders and labor leaders and charter leaders and everyone, that it is going to stop here. And so we have really worked hard in the last year in Cleveland to bring together a coalition. Our mayor has been an incredible leader, a Democratic mayor that went to our Republican governor. You could not be farther apart on the spectrum, and said, we need help in Cleveland changing education. And here's my business leaders, my charter leaders, my teachers union with me. Here's citizens and parents. Here's my religious leaders, my philanthropic leaders. Everybody is in. We got huge legislative change in place because of that, and the mayor has then turned the attention right away to, so how do we fund this as a community? He's built, with his leadership, we've built a higher education compact that actually has a responsibility of all of the partners to align their resources to one single strategy. And so we're really placing a bet that for the first city in America that is actually going to finally say, not on our watch, that we're actually all in. And not only will that allow it to sustain beyond me, that'll actually allow me to stay so that I don't have to be the person looking back someday.
That's good. We lose far too many good superintendents. So Mayor Smith, Eric kind of set it up for you because he talked about his mayor and the support that he got from the mayor. You're a businessman turned politician. You're known for your financial acumen, and then you understand all these issues, and you've got a city to run. And yet you've got schools that are struggling and work that needs to be done. How do you balance that? How do you serve as a mayor for all services and yet still bring your schools along in a way that's going to be helpful?
Well, first of all, I think, and boy, I love hearing that story about mayors getting involved, because for too long we've tried to balance this. And what that meant is that leaders, especially mayors, sort of took a hands-off approach on the school district. I mean, that was, butt out. It's not your territory. And there was this casual relationship, but mayors didn't tread into the area and the schools didn't tread into the cities. And that has been a disservice to us as communities. And what you're seeing in Cleveland as a leader is something that mayors now have woken up to and said, listen, we have to treat our education as not only one of the assets and one of the services in our community, but as if perhaps the most important asset that we have. And it's taken this crisis to create that. And once again, it wasn't a report which got, we've been talking 30 years now on A Nation at Risk, but it was the reality that if our cities can no longer and our communities can no longer compete economically, then the quality of life overall just goes in the toilet. And education is the one common denominator that drives economic opportunity. It's not tax policy, it's not incentives, it's education, and it's having people, because economic opportunity is about people. And I think the reality is that this is a community effort. This is not simply a school district effort. School districts, educators come up with great programs, but we need a Sputnik moment. I mean, the thing that drove America for 50 years was a stupid little, for those of you who are young in here, a stupid little satellite. And I have to say, I'm even too young. I think I was 2 years old when Sputnik came out.
Oh, are they making me feel old up here?
But what it was America woke up one day and said, I can't believe we just got whipped by the Russians. And we decided as a nation, right then and there, we were not going to finish second. And that's what drove us to create great scientists and engineers and teachers and everything. Now, the programs were in place, but it wasn't the programs that created that. It was the combination of good programs and incredible desire, and a desire built on the need to be successful. We've gotten fat and sassy. We didn't need that anymore. I mean, we ruled the world, economic area, and have ruled it. That's not the case anymore. We're middle of the pack. And we have not yet woken up to the reality that we can't afford to be that if we want to have a future. What worked yesterday isn't going to work tomorrow. So as mayors, we look at this, and like they did in Cleveland, they said, the future of my city is dependent upon my Sputnik moment and creating this environment. And I know a lot of people will hem-haw about the talk and motivation and creating that kind of thing. Believe me, I live in a community where I've seen it happen. For heaven's sakes, we elected a president 4 years based on hope and change. And you'll have differing opinions as to how that's worked out. But the fact is, we believed in us as a country, and as America, that's what's driven us for a long time. Now, you have to have that drive, and then you have to have the basic program to deliver. And I think that that's the connection and why it's so important. Mayors believe it's so important. As an institution, U.S. Conference, and I certainly believe that you have to get the political leader. And the mayor, we believe, in a community is the one to lead the charge. Because the mayor can, with the bully pulpit, with the ability to get up and motivate a community, can help a school district or school districts succeed, can engage parents, can have the kind of discussion that bridges the gap between parents who would love to have their kids go to college but don't believe it's possible. Somebody has to be there to tell them, no, it is, and here's how we're going to make it happen. And they have to have somebody to look up and say, I believe that this person can help take me there. And then they get together with the school district and make it happen. That's why when you balance city assets, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter how great my streets are, how great my sewer system is, not even how great my police department is. What matters is how great my future is, and that comes right back to education. So that's how I balance it. It's the most important investment we make in our community.
Great. Tom, speaking of balance, you have a balancing act, don't you? As Chief State School Officer, you are technical assistance provider, you are oversight monitor, you are a collaborator, and you have local districts to work with, especially, and I know Arkansas, that believe strongly in local control. How do you take all of that, put it together, and then capitalize on your cross-state collaboration and knowledge and make all this work?
Well, it really is a pretty tough balancing act, because Arkansas has some strong roots. And, us in Mississippi always used to say, thank God for each other. We would say, thank God for Mississippi. Mississippi say, thank God for Arkansas.
And Alabama would say, thank God for both of you, right?
And I think what we have to create is a sense of why. When you want people to change, they won't change for the sake of change. But if you create within them this sense of what they want, we all want the next generation, our children, my children, I have a 16-year-old and 11-year-old. We want them to have a better life than what we've had. And so you have to create, I think, that sense that change is not just for the sake of change, but change is for the future of our state, for the future of these students that we have in our classrooms that are the parents' children or the grandparents' grandchildren. And I think that has fallen upon us as an agency, me as the commissioner, to be able to create an atmosphere and an environment that allows them to accept the fact that we can't keep doing business as we've always done the business. About a year ago, I had an opportunity in working with our governor's workforce cabinet to meet with the Minister of Education from Taiwan. He brought 5 university presidents with him to talk about developing a partnership with our state, becoming and working with Arkansas to develop economies and workforce arrangements or partnerships. Well, as the meeting progressed, it became very clear to me that they were very proud of their educational system and what they were doing with their students. And go look at Taiwan's educational attainment for their population, and it won't just shock you, it'll blow you out of your chair. And they began to really boast about how they were really beating the United States in all of these high school international competitions, and how they were going to create the next economy, and they were going to be the innovators of those economies, and they needed our citizens to deliver the economy. So instead of us saying, you know, we innovated and someone else delivered, they want to innovate and we deliver. That created a real competitive spirit in a guy who grew up as the superintendent's kid, coached football and basketball, and have been competitive all my life, to say, that's not going to work in Arkansas. Now, my economic development counterpart at the agency for the governor didn't like my attitude about that, but he began to understand that if we can get the message to our schools and to those local school boards that this change is not about change for the sake of change, but it's about the future of our state and our children. And if you want your children and your grandchildren to have the kind of lives that we grew up in. You know, Scott, when we were going through high school, where, you know, we had friends who said, you know, I'm finishing high school, I'm going to go work down the street at that industry or that factory, and they made a pretty good life. They, you know, by the time they were 35, they were buying a house, they had 2 cars, their children were going to school. That's not going to happen for my 16-year-old son. That's not going to happen for my 11-year-old daughter. And so for me as a parent and as the commissioner, it is a balancing act, but sometimes you have to use the position to encourage change. But that change has to occur by people understanding why. Mm-hmm. And I think that's where you have to balance it. Mm-hmm. Give them a reason why they need to change, and then give them the tools and give them the opportunity to make the change for the right reason.
Thank you. So this session is about getting to the how. So I'd like to open it up now to those of you who want to ask questions or even share a little bit about how you're getting to the how, but I'll caution you. A statement is good. A statement with a question is better. A question that my panelists can answer is the best. So think in that context and let's get involved in this conversation. Alan Taylor from the state of Connecticut, and you want to know why I know him? He was my last chair before I retired from NASB, so he was my last boss.
Never your boss.
We all know that.
I want some rhetorical help. In his opening statement, Jonah, you mentioned kind of in passing the importance of hitting third-grade benchmarks, and we all know all of that data about the importance of early education. At the same time, we, at least if you deal with urban schools, know that a lot of our parents aren't prepared to bring early education to their kids because a lot of them weren't educated themselves. My city, 15 years ago, 25% of births were to parents, moms under the age of 20, and now all the way down to 20%. And most of those kids just aren't prepared. We've lost them. And our teachers, most of our teachers, are dealing with kids, some of whom may not have come into the school system until they were in 8th grade, ninth grade, and all of those problems. And yet the biggest argument that you get back from teachers and a lot of very well-meaning people is, we've got to fix all of these other things first. And we don't have time, and realistically, this society doesn't yet have the resources or the willingness to marshal the resources to fix those basic problems of poverty yet. And yet we can't leave the kids there. So every time we make the argument about the importance of what happens first, we in some ways build up the argument about it's unfair to ask so much of us. And the only answer I've been able to come up with is, yeah, it would be a lot easier if we could fix all those other things. But until we do that, we've got all these kids, and we've got to give them a future. And yet, I have this feeling that we argue against ourselves at the same time, and we make it harder to convince people that that can really be done. So I'm looking for help in how to balance those two things.
Who wants to take that?
I'll take a first stab at it. One thing that's interests me is when we talk about the third grade standard, we know that if we can get a kid at third grade standard and we can get them to that level, what are the odds that they're going to finish high school? They go up considerably. What are the odds they're going to be they're going to be able to compete, that we're not going to lose them? We seem to be fighting a multifaceted and multi-front war. When we know, and part of that is because in politics like business, we deal with quarterly results. We're as good as the last test results. And so we keep throwing resources at trying to fix a problem that actually was created in the first and second and third grade. And I think that if we do have resources, one of the tough decisions we need to make, and I know we're raising standards in Arizona, we just adopted the third grade standard. Rich, that goes in this year, next year? And yet one of the big questions is, okay, what are the resources that we're going to throw at it to be able to achieve that because of the problems you're talking about? And I think we have to make as politicians, we have to make a very serious decision that while high school dropouts are important, we can't do everything. Maybe we need to invest in the next generation and make sure that if we're going to adopt that standard, we're going to declare a war on failure. We're not going to allow a kid to get past third grade, and we're going to do whatever it takes. Understanding we may not reap the total rewards of that until, third grade, 9, 10, 12 years down the road, but then we've set in motion a system that goes through it. I think that's one of the issues, is you have competing challenges because in many ways you have to redirect resources to something that's not going to pay dividends for 10 years.
If I can just, you mentioned, I think, early on that your oh no moment is Arkansas, when you're going to roll out the Common Core at the secondary school. And part of the reason for that is because all those high school teachers, or a fair number of them, are standing there saying, but you got to fix what happens below us before you can expect us to do any better. And there's a lot of truth to it, which you've just said, but that creates this enormous rhetorical problem that is what I'm worrying about.
Well, I just want to say one thing. I think there is a danger. There are many states. I was just having this conversation with State Senator Clark Jolly, who's here in Oklahoma the other day, who's the appropriations and budget chair. Is that how you refer to it? He's the money guy. He controls the purse strings in Oklahoma. And our conversation was about how Oklahoma has passed a bunch of reforms that seem like the right direction on paper. So they've got A through F report cards. That was one of your bills. They have grade level reading by third grade. They have end of high school instruction exam, end of instruction exam. They have a teacher leader effectiveness bill. And then now there's a Common Core, and none of those have funding attached. And I think we were agreeing, and I don't think this is a partisan issue, we are agreeing that the state is not going to get the results that it wants. The legislators who champion those changes aren't going to get the results that they intend without investing in those reforms. And I think we need to get past this binary notion that either we reform education or we fund education. That's too overly simplistic in terms of the rhetoric of either have to fund it before you reform it, which is I think what you're saying, or you just reform it, but never mind the resources. And I hope that this next stage here, over the next few years, as the business cycle has turned around, Oklahoma's more fortunate than many states in its economy, is that we will fund the reforms so that we are ensuring that grade level reading legislation isn't just an unfunded mandate saying, here's the stick, or pay more attention teachers each year, but there's actually resources for a variety of the strategies that actually get kids to read by third grade, as an example. So I hope that that's something that, and we have Rich Crandall in the room, we have probably other legislators that, folks are getting as budgets get better, that the first thing they want to do, I hope, is to fund some of the reforms that have gone through so they actually work.
I actually would back it up even out of the policy discussions for a minute and really get at the rhetoric of what people are talking about. And for me, there's the frankly not very hidden message of, I can't be accountable for this. That's the real conversation. And so two things really come to my mind when I talk about this, because I face this a lot. The first is this toxic nostalgia that somehow things were better in the past. Isocrates actually wrote about one of his class of students, his lament that all they wanted to do was hang at the mead hall with the flute girls. We've been having this conversation for literally ever, right? And so part of it is like, get over it, and then also it really challenging people to stop looking only at the deficits. And of course, there are challenges that we're facing, but with those challenges are assets. And so, think about all of those same families that if I sent this room out right now and said, use the buses and trains to get down to the Capitol, we would all be going, how does the machine work, right? And our families actually have this incredible literacy of how to navigate the timetables and the systems of a transportation network in Cleveland or in DC or whatever. That's a literacy skill. And that children actually bring into the classroom even before third grade. And so how do we say, first of all, get over the dialogue, you are responsible, it is our job, but also there's actually a lot of tools you can use. If they can do this, they can do this other literacy skill as well. So I would actually try to look for language that helps you actually challenge the core assumptions, because I think the assumptions are even more dangerous than the real policy challenges.
One of the problems we have as a politician, as you're looking at budgets, is we in Mesa, we had a huge, like most cities, we had a $65 million deficit and a $300 million general fund. That's pretty steep. And we said, we adopted a term. We said we have to deal with a new reality. And we literally in this country have a new reality that politicians don't want to talk about. At the city level, all too often they say, I'm going to do whatever I can, but I will never touch public safety. Well, you can't do that. In the city of Mesa, we could have eliminated every department in the city and not even come close to covering a $65 million deficit without making massive changes in our police and fire departments. And the funny thing is that they had never been asked to make changes, so how efficient do you think? And they're great people, nobody ever asked them to be more efficient. Well, when we asked them to be more efficient, then when they had to be more efficient, they rose to the occasion, and we had not only a balanced budget, we have a much more effective and efficient city government. Our economy is different now than it was 50 years ago. The resources we have available are different than they were. One of the things about nostalgic is I would love to be the nostalgic when we didn't spend as much on things like entitlements and things that rarely enter into the political discussion, but suck a lot of the resources we used to have to invest in schools, streets, roads, those kind of things. We're not dealing with the reality of the situation. What that means is we've lost the concept of investment in government. At the federal level, we equate any expenditure, whether we're spending it on Social Security or spending it on a federal highway system, as being the same type of expenditure, and it's not. And we do that in our communities too. So I think that one of the things we're going to have to do is be honest with ourselves and deal with this new reality. That is, we don't have the resources we used to. Even if the wealth is there, it's being directed other ways, which means we have to make tough decisions as to where we're going to invest. And education is both a short-term and a long-term investment. That's hard in the political scene. At the cities, one of the reasons why I think you see the mayor of Cleveland and others is that we couldn't kick this down the road. We have to balance our budgets. We also have to pick up the garbage next Thursday. And we have to fix that pothole. Otherwise, people know where I live, and they know where I shop, and they'll tell me where that pothole is. Unfortunately, that isn't the same with our members of Congress and everything. They're a little bit more detached. So we have to take that approach that we're dealing with a new reality, and we have to prioritize, and we haven't gotten there yet.
Other question or comment getting to the how? Yes. Could you tell us where you're from?
I am Mayor Smith's next door neighbor. Almost, no. Senator Rich Crandall from Arizona. And the title of this session is Getting to How. And I love that someone really talked about the bubble, because the question I really want to, now that I know that Tom has a football background, I was going to ask him about the higher ed opportunities he feels are available at Louisiana Monroe.
They're much better today than they were last week.
They are there. No, in all seriousness, a few of us education chairs got to have a conference called 2 weeks ago with Secretary Duncan. We got to talk, we really just got to ask him any question we wanted to. Very casual setting for a conference call. And so I asked about my biggest fear is Common Core preparation. It doesn't matter what district I go to, who I speak to. If I say, how do you feel about being, how are you ready for 2014-15? The answer is always the same. Oh yeah. Oh, we're ready. So I said, Secretary Duncan, what's the barometer you use to tell if people are ready or not? And he said, there's two things I look for. The first is how much PD is taking place with my teachers. What's going on there. The second is how much do my parents know about Common Core? So with that background, I'm in Utah last Sunday. I opened up the Sunday paper, and this is I brought it for Mike because I wanted to leave this with him.
You brought a prop?
I brought a prop. How do you like this, Scott?
This is my neighbor. I'm sorry.
I don't want to walk by the mayor's. He's a dynamic mayor who wants to do big things in education, and he will tell you at 6 a.m. what he wants to do about education. Local section, I open it up, and the back half is this whole ad on Common Core and who the business leaders are that support it. This is Utah's Deseret News last Sunday. This ad was written for the 250 people in this room. I handed it to my wife. I said, what do you think this means, and what do you think they want us to do? It doesn't talk about, it has no specifics. It just uses these, the one sentence. The Common Core State Centers Initiative is a state-led effort to establish a shared set of clear educational standards. And that's kind of it. And then the federal government was not involved in creating the standards and will not have a role in their implementation. I mean, obviously everyone in this room can tell where I'm getting at. And so Tom and Eric, and then Jonah, I know what you guys are doing in Arizona that kicks tail. I love it. And then Scott, we've got some big things to talk about after hearing you here. But I'd love to know, it's getting to how. How about the specifics? Where are we going to get the parents to understand the details when really we're still operating at this level just among this bubble of ourselves? What are you doing in your states?
Well, in Arkansas, that's why we're trying to put into the hands of local school districts tools that are at the parent level and at the grandparent level and at the business level about what does Common Core mean. We can't communicate with them the way we communicate with educators, with all the acronyms that are a part of that. Just interestingly enough, the other day we had a work session with our state board. I had a new person who came to work with the agency who was doing some presentations to the board using all these acronyms, and I had to stop her and say, remember, these are not educators. Let's talk to them as you would talk to a grandparent or a parent or just a citizen on the street when we're talking about this particular subject. So we're trying to help them develop those tools so that they can have those town hall meetings, that they can have those meetings at their local school board to have a conversation about what does this really mean. It really boils down to what do we want our city, our town, our state to have for opportunities for your children. Most of us that have children don't want to see our children move away to another state. I don't want to see them move to Monroe, Louisiana. I want my two children to come back to Arkansas. No matter where they go, I want them to come back and be a part of this family that has been in Arkansas and been in education that has been good to the Kimbrell family. That may not happen. And it will not happen if we don't create opportunities for them. So we have to talk about opportunities and what that means for their children. Because I can tell you, I've been in communities where I've talked to parents who have said, it really worries me if my child graduates from high school and has an opportunity to go to college because they may not come back and work at the plant down the street. So, there is that communication that we have to release some parents. I mean, I'm educated. I've been, matter of fact, got to go to Finland. You want to talk about chicken and egg? 40 years ago, their educational system, they say, was worse than most in the world. I said, what came first? Because there's very little poverty there. And they said, we don't know. It just all happened at once. Nobody can describe to you really how it happened. It just happened. So, we've got to describe to parents what this really means for their children and their future if we really want to get them to buy in. So, you can't use that kind of language. You have to use the language of the common person.
If I could, real quickly, I'll be blunt with you. As a non-educator, Common Core will not motivate a single parent to get involved. Sorry. It's not going to happen. Educators feel great about it. Common Core, it doesn't mean anything to the parents. Personalize it. And that's what I've done in Mesa. Do you want your child to move away? That's how we've talked about economic development activities. I came up with a phrase when I was running, and we implemented this, and I learned in business long ago, you have to give your employees a purpose. You have to give them an end. You have to personalize it. How we did that is in Mesa's, is I came up with a phrase called building a better Mesa. And that sounds so hokey, doesn't it? Every speech I gave, we even have council members who did over and unders as to how many times and how soon I would mention building a better Mesa. But I'll tell you, I gave 500 speeches around building a better Mesa, and everything we did, every initiative we did was couched in building a better Mesa so that my citizens knew exactly why we were doing what we were doing. You want to extend that sewer line? Well, what is that? We're building a better Mesa. Here's how. Because it creates economic development, because it does this, because that's building a community for you. We put it in, it became a verb as opposed to, is Common Core an action term? No, it's a definition, which no one's going to understand. And even if they understand it, it doesn't motivate anybody to action. As a community, to get out of this bubble, you're going to have to personalize it. You're going to have to come up with something, as hokey as it may seem, come up with something that defines where you want to end up. If that's keeping your kids in the city, and a lot of times that's what people want to do. Well, how can I keep them in the city? Create opportunity. How do I create opportunity? You have to attract businesses that want skilled people, then you got to provide skilled people. That's how your kid's going to be able to come back and live with you, and you can go see your grandkids. You want to get seniors to vote for a bond issue? Tell them their grandkids aren't going to move 500 or 1,000 miles away. Right. Believe me, it's incredibly motivating. Yep. We're not there yet with, if we want to get real reform and get people to buy in, you've got to get that message.
Eric?
I would say this is somehow the Common Core has come with it, the idea that we have to reinvent the world, right? And this is actually a place where we don't. I mean, what has changed with the Common Core from a parent's perspective? Did I want my kid to graduate before the Common Core? Yeah. Do I want him to graduate now? Yeah. Mm-hmm. Do I want him to go to college or a career or a workforce now? Yeah. Did I want that before? Yeah. So how do I, as a parent, do that? Well, what are you teaching my kid in third grade? And I need to tell you what I'm teaching in third grade. And I'm telling them something different about third grade now than I was before. But I don't need to tell them, why educationally it's different. I need to tell them, what am I teaching your kid in third grade so that they can graduate and they can go into college or a workforce or a career. That actually hasn't changed in any way from a parent's point of view. And so there's actually a lot that we already know about how to communicate this if we would just stop trying to reinvent it, actually. The other thing, though, that I think is exciting for me, and it is one of my oh yeah moments, is that's where we have been able, as urban districts in a shared network now, been able to mass duplicate the materials that we're going to use for that. And so we have created the parent roadmap of what third grade looks like and shared it among the large city schools in multiple languages. And then so now I can go to my parent training meetings or my parent universities or whatever, and we already have the tools to have that conversation. But the conversation itself actually isn't any different, and we're actually going to do harm by trying to invent a new conversation that we don't need when families really want to know, look, can you graduate my kid, and when you do, will they be able to do something with their life?
Eric, what I would say, though, is that where the disconnect is that parents are not universally convinced that your interest in their kid is the same as their interest in their kid.
I agree.
And so when you tell them, here's what I'm educating your kid in third grade, it's not new. But they need to understand that what I'm teaching corresponds with corresponds with your goals for your child. And I think we have that disconnect for a variety of reasons. We assume that they know that we want to take their kids where they want them. I don't think they do. I think we have to get back and make that connection.
I would agree.
I think we have time for one more question.
Good morning. I'm Tim Taylor with Colorado Succeeds, and I have the least desirable of your three options. I have a comment, but I'll be very brief.
I said they're good.
In regards to the previous conversation about how do we fix the public education system in lieu of the social problems that we have, our organization talks a lot about the fact that we'll never solve those social issues until we fix our public education system. The public education system is the solution to crime and poverty and underemployment and all of those other pieces that are out there. And that's why we've got to start with that piece to solve the others.
Thank you. Well, I worried when I was sitting in the back that maybe my panel would not be as vocal as the previous one. Didn't have to worry.
Thanks for your confidence.
I
Gee.
think, well,
Wow.
you know, sometimes people are less vocal than others, so I'm delighted that we had such a rich conversation this morning. I think we can say that if we did have to talk in sound bites, we want all kids to have choices now, options for their future, and that they're adaptable later when the world changes and careers change. And we want that for our children, for our grandchildren. The way these folks talk, I think I may be the only grandparent on the podium this morning, but it's what we want for all children, and I thank you all for
I want to say
participating
one more
this
thing.
morning. I
Please.
knew it with a politician on the panel, but
Please engage your mayor. Ask them, beg them, just like they did in Cleveland. One of my great disappointments is I went to our schools and I said, I will do anything, anywhere that you want to advance yours. And they basically turned me down, and I can't stand that. Please engage your mayors. They have an incredible bully pulpit, and they're ready and willing to do it.
thank you, Mayor Smith, and thank all of you.